feet. And so over just a few years, because I was going to the University of Montana to study, I began to collect resources, and the first big one was The Last Best Place. And I used Percy Bullchild, I used James Welch in the classroom. And so, and then I guess it became more political when I began participating in MEA conferences and got to know OPI people. And then in 1992-93, I had the Christa McCullough Fellowship and met Denise Juneau, whose father came to my school and said, "What can my daughter do to help you?" And I was just, wow. So I was doing presentations at conferences with Denise. And so because of Denise and because of that involvement with OPI, then Carol was advocating for funded monies. And so a student of mine, and I went to Helena and testified. And I suppose that's where, so I became involved with maybe before some of these people were in education, became involved with realizing how really important it was. And that's when this student and I both said, this is not a separate endeavor. This is part of what we are being educated for. And I remember saying to my students at the beginning of the year, after I was first criticized for using too much Indian Ed stuff, I said, you know what, I'm going to teach a lot of white men, dead white men stuff, and I'm going to try really hard to counteract that and to be as inclusive as it possibly can. So that's my introduction.
Thank you, Dottie. And thank you for your work helping, move Indian Ed for All along. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How about Shane?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dottie. That was so good to hear your story. I haven't heard it before. And I would have liked to listen to you for a lot longer and ask you some more questions. But maybe we'll have that opportunity at some point. So yeah, my name's Shane Doyle. I'm from Crow Agency. I grew up there in the town of Crow Agency and went to grade school there, and took the bus into Hardin once junior high came, and that was before Indian Ed for All. And so we really didn't learn anything about Native people in high school, in grade school, and junior high. There were really no Native teachers that I could think of. We had tutors, and so when I went to college, I wanted to come back and be a teacher at Crow. That was my dream. And when I came back my first year, I ended up teaching at Hardin, and I was so bummed out. There was no openings at Crow. And I remember John, what was his name? He was one of the guys in the school district. He said, "Shane, I think you're the first person I've ever heard of who wanted to transfer out of Hardin to go to Crow." And I told him, my heart's in Crow. That's where I'm from. That's my whole family's there. My grandmother was a cook there at the Crow School for 25 years. All the years where I was in grade school, I would go into, and even before I started grade school, she would take care of me when I was a little boy. And, I would go into school with her early in the morning, and she would cook breakfast. And, I would hang out with all those old ladies in the kitchen. They'd be smoking cigarettes and making oatmeal, drinking coffee and gossiping, and then my grandma would always make me go hang out with the janitor. And he was a really nice older guy, and he would take me down. It sounds kind of creepy now, but he had this place underneath the gym, and kind of kept his supplies down there, and there was a cot. And my grandma would say, "Go down there and take a nap on the cot," and I would sometimes do that. But anyway, those are memories I haven't spoken of or thought of in a long time. But I think from day one, right, from before I even started school, it was my destiny to be an Indian Ed for All. You know, once I came back, I got my degree, I came back and taught at Lodgegrass for 3 years, at Hardin for a year. Then I came back, I got my master's in Native American Studies. And that year that I finished my master's degree in 2005 was the year that Montana devoted all that money to implementing Indian Ed. And I got hired by the Bozeman School District. And, you know, the rest is history. You know, I mean, I've had so many different experiences now. And I can't even tell you, my life is so intertwined with Indian Ed for All. I have no idea what my life would be like without it. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Abbreviated.
Oh, I love hearing that, Shane. I feel the same way about Indian Ed for All. It's become such a part of the fiber of my being. I literally can't imagine working anywhere else doing, you know, outside of Indian country. It's amazing. It's amazing. So it's wonderful to hear that. Thank you so much. Jordan.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jordan Langford Forrester. My Ani name is Sikbian Nitha, which means Bright Trail Woman. And I just want to, for a moment, congratulate all of the other honorees for this award. It is heartbreaking that this award exists in the memory of someone who was so important. But I just want to, you know, I want to acknowledge Teresa, and I want to just say, you know, congratulations again to the fellow recipients. So I grew up in Great Falls, and that's the school district that I'm in now. And I grew up in a system that, you know, similar to a lot of folks, didn't really have access to a lot of Indigenous content. And it wasn't until I started at the University of Montana, which I'm kind of feeling like is a theme, so also go Gris. Didn't start until I began taking Native American Studies courses at the University of Montana that I started to learn more complete and accurate historical content, which is so related to a lot of our contemporary issues and a lot of the contemporary social problems that we're seeing. Because growing up, when you're a Native student and you see things in your family, you see things in your community, you just really internalize that this is the way it is. This is just the way it is. And this is what it means. And until you go and you have access to true history, you don't really understand how we got here, how we arrived here. And so something that just really clicked for me that I really wanted to work in and try to help elicit change was, I don't think that this is information that students, Native and non-Native students, should have to wait until they get into college to have access to. I don't think that this is information that students should have to pay for to be exposed to. And it wasn't until Mandy Smoker Broadus came and she read her poetry at in one of my literature classes, actually, and I saw this demonstration of a person who was able to do all of these things together. And I was just like, whoa, that's what I want to do. And so it was just really, you know, from day one, I was lucky enough, right after I graduated college, I was able to apply for a grant from OPI. And it was a $15,000 grant that they were allocating to people that were interested in taking this further. And so I was awarded this grant. And so I was hired to work up in Sunburst at North County School District. But then I also received this allocation of money, and I was able to begin ordering texts and content and working with the community up there. And it was just so wonderful. And then I was lucky enough to, there was a position open in Great Falls Public Schools that I was lucky enough to get hired for. And I've just been doing that. And I'm just so grateful for especially my students that I get to work with every day. And I also need to acknowledge my teaching partner, Miranda Murray, who without her, we don't do any of this stuff by ourselves. And if you do, good on you. I don't though. So I just need to acknowledge, you know, all the great people that I work with, and and continue to work with. If I didn't have Miranda, I would still be back at the office trying to figure out how to turn my computer on. So anyways, thank you all for listening. Sorry that was kind of long-winded, but congratulations again to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. And I'd like to throw in that Miranda was a recipient of this award last year. So Jordan's in wonderful company with Miranda, and they are often co-present together with our, like I said, the Unpacking the Essential Understandings and the Deeper Dive series. They both co-facilitated, and they're just wonderful. We still have those recordings available. You can still get redo units for watching them. So I highly encourage it. Thank you so much, and thank you for honoring Teresa. It's just wonderful that this work is moving forward, and it's wonderful that that there is still so much, love for her and respect for her, and I know that would make her family very happy. Yeah. So Daisy.
Hello, everybody. I guess I fell in love with Indian Ed for All when I was 4, and my parents took my brother and my sister and I throughout the West, and I saw the vastness, the untouched beauty, and we visited a lot of reservations, and I was like, I felt home. That was a fleeting time in my life. We went back to New Jersey. I grew up about 30 miles outside of Manhattan. And believe it or not, my town, Mawa, had a native group there, but they weren't recognized as a tribe. It was very interesting. And so unwittingly, I grew up around a lot of ignorance, racism. I just knew something was off. And I just knew I had to get back out west and be home again. So after several careers in pharmaceuticals and bringing medications to market through the FDA and everything, I finally got back to Montana. I got another degree after business. I got another degree in education. And I wound up, my first teaching experience was on the reservation in Hot Springs, Montana. Wonderful place, great community. And I got to learn all about Salish, and we had Salish taught in my 3rd grade classroom. And I just took as much PD as I could. I wanted to learn as much as I could. I immersed myself. And then when I went to teach in Trout Creek, that was off the reservation, and I was like, wow, there isn't a lot of knowledge in the area, or as much as I thought there should be. So it became my goal as the principal to really work at it, and we built an Indian Ed for All library, and I talked to experts, and we had Tammy Elser come out and Pearl Yellowman, and we had students from Ronan come and play and be with our students there. And it just went on and on. We visited the People Center and the Bison Range, and we just incorporated Indian Ed for All, like the law says, into each and every subject. It's not that hard. If I can do it, anybody can do it. You just have to have the drive and the passion. Another thing, Dorothea brought this up to my mind, something she said, but I was at a school in Pennsylvania. I was sitting in listening to a US history teacher speak to parents about what he would be covering in his syllabus that year. And he never mentioned Native Americans. And I thought, how odd is that? So at the end, he took questions, and I said, well, how do you address that situation? And he said, that really has nothing to do with US history. And it took my breath away. This is an educator. And so my goal is to spread knowledge, to get people to have different perspectives. I come from 2 different worlds, one where you're in that bubble, and now I'm in a different bubble, and I want the 2 to come together, So that's my goal. I've worked for WMPLC, which provides professional development in Montana. And I'm happy to say we have about 25 online Moodle courses for Indian Ed for All that have been approved by the University of Montana. So teachers from Montana can take those courses and get credit. But the main thing is, it's not for the credits, it's to immerse yourself in Indian Ed for All and share it with teachers. And anyone that knows me knows I'm about tolerance, peace, kindness, diversity, getting along. After all, I grew up near Manhattan. You've got millions of people all getting along with each other, and they're all special. And so that's pretty much what I'm all about and why I love Indian Ed for All.
Awesome. I so hope that you'll still be integrated in the Indian Ed for All community after you retire. But I know where to find you, so I'll drag you out. You're hiding. Karen, I can't remember when you joined us and all this, but we're just kind of introducing ourselves, and we are just talking about what was our inspiration moment. When, how did we get into Indian Ed for All and become passionate about it? And hi, Sylvan. I see Dottie's husband leaning over, and it's so wonderful to see him too. I'm glad he's joining us. So yeah, Karen, talk to us about Sydney, Montana.
Okay, so my name is Karen Palari, and I want to echo what others have said, and that I truly appreciate and am so grateful for this opportunity. I'm going to use Daisy's word in saying bubble, because I was born and raised in northeastern Montana, and I was born and raised in a bubble. And within that bubble, we experienced the reservations that were around us. We played sports and other activities against Native students or our peers. My parents took me to Fort Buford, and the teepees were up and they were amazing, but it seemed like everything we experienced was from, and I really don't want to say, I don't want to be biased, but the white man's perspective, it really did seem that way. And that's how my life was until I went to college, and I met this amazing professor at Carroll, and I had to take an anthropology course from him. And it was kind of an eye opener, but you know, you take college courses and you kind of meander through them, and college is over and you enter the real world. And it kind of left my brain again, because again, I'm in this bubble. And not until my husband and I had moved back to northeastern Montana, and I had went to work at this rural school, did my eyes kind of truly open. I was a part of the rewriting the science standards, I think in 2015, or I don't remember when that was actually. And we were at the Capitol, and we ended up engaging in probably over an hour-long conversation about Indian Ed for All. And it was not a heated conversation, but there was so much compassion and passion that was delivered from these people that were really trying to get everybody to understand their perspective. And it allowed me an opportunity to kind of reflect on how I was brought up, and also that one anthropology class that I took, and how much he exerted in energy in trying to help us understand where he was coming from. And from that point on, I had a lot of reflection within me, what this really means, because within the schools that I had worked in, Indian Ed for All was just kind of a one and done, right? So OPI asks you to teach Indian Ed for All, and you teach it, and you have to fill out a form, but you just teach one lesson, that's all you have to do, and then you complete that form and you submit it. And so that's kind of what the perspective was. And I didn't feel right about that after this conversation that I engaged in the Capitol. And somewhere around that point, I actually had to pull it up so I could remember the name of it. I had signed up for a course through the Office of Public Instruction that taught a book called Away from Home, American Indian Boarding School Experiences. And they had sent that book out to us, and I thought the pictures were absolutely captivating. And so through the ignorance that I had been born and raised in, and I started looking and reading the stories and realizing that there's a whole nother world out there. There are people that have a life that we don't recognize, that is so true and important to our history. And so from that book, it took me some time not to read it, but to really think about what it meant and how you deliver that. And I took it into the classroom and the kids didn't really receive it. So I thought I was missing something. So by this point, I'd kind of been back and forth to Helena a couple of times to work with OPI for some projects, which has been probably the most fueling experience I've ever had in regards to my motivation to teach Indian Ed for All. And so I started doing novel pairs, and I found a book called She Echo. I think I said that right. That's this little girl's experience about leaving home. And she tells this beautiful story about her relationship with her grandmother and what the earth provides for them. And I don't know, there was something in it that just really pulled at me. And from that point on, I started searching for books, and everything was a juvenile novel or a young adult novel to a children's novel, and everything I did paired. And then I taught Birch Bark, and this became pretty consistent in my classroom. Once a month, I was adding something in. I was trying to incorporate as often as possible. I taught Birch Bark, and we made Birch Bark books, and we made sandpaper, actual sand glued on the paper, and they created little journals. And the kids were so proud of what they had done, and they had so much excitement and enthusiasm that then I think that May that my colleagues wanted to do a field day. So I had met with one of my teachers that I worked with, and we had kind of brainstormed. And by this point, Jennifer had been pretty amazing about sending resources when I asked for them, or when I was questioning, or when I'd come back from Helena and I was digging through, and I found this, there's a couple of spiral bound resources produced from OPI that have games the Native Americans played. So we built our field day completely around the games. That's all they were. And the kids came out of it and they were charged. And so our team reflected, and from that point, this is kind of where it just spread to other people as well. Our team reflected, and we started talking about how to keep this moving forward. Instead of it just being a one and done, we're going to be consistent within the presentation and to the students, essentially, because like others I've heard, I didn't have that growing up. I didn't have any exposure other than my personal or social life. So putting that in the classroom so the kids could experience that and receiving the energy that they felt from those was an empowering experience. And I think it just is kind of a building block where you take one step and then you take another step, and then you might take 10 leaps and then you take another one. And this last year, I think probably one of the coolest things that I dug into was the broken flute. And I had decided over the summer I was going to read a whole series of Native American books. I read Wind from the Enemy Sky, Fool's Crow, all these books that tell these amazing stories, and was able to bring that back into the classroom with short stories and the broken flute. And the kids did research and presentations, and we went to some of the tribal resources that we could refer or that we could pull from. And we really had a fantastic, actually this lasted for about 3 to 4 months, fantastic conversation within the classroom. And it's not done there. And that's the fantastic part, is because this isn't a one and done. This is a part of us. It's a part of our state. It's a part of our history. It's a part of our culture, and it shouldn't be abandoned or ignored. So the idea is we just keep building and building on it, and that's it.
It gets me verklempt, because it's just, I mean, this is where it's at. You are really the people who make Indian education for all happen in Montana, and I'm so grateful for all of the work that each of you does. So we're starting to get a couple of questions in the chat, and I really I think with Andrea, I might do this in 2 parts, Andrea, and she's joining us from Germany today. She's a Montana teacher, but she's on an assignment in Germany. What advice do each of you offer to teachers who want a deeper connection with their students around Indian Ed for All? And you can all just jump in.
I think they have to make a connection. Like, they actually have to find themselves within what the culture is. They have to be able to empathize And I don't want anybody to think that I'm alluding to pity, but there has to be an understanding. They have to be able to feel what they've gone through and have some sort of an idea that this isn't an isolated one time. So putting them in that position, I guess.
Somebody else maybe. What was the question again, Jennifer? I don't hear.
How to best connect with your students and develop a deeper connection.
All students, or are you talking about all students?
I would say how to bring Indian Ed for All in a relevant and respectful way into your classroom, so that you not only create meaningful content that the kids want to learn about, but also connecting with the students and, you know, deepening your relationship, so then they want to learn more about Indian Ed for All.
One of the first things I do because I work for Humanities Montana, and I go into lots of schools and I'm working with all levels. There's a little activity that I ask students. If somebody were to come to your school and interview your classroom about what it's like to be a third grader or a kindergartner or a freshman in this high school, what is it like? And then they would interview you a little bit, and then they would go and write the story. And then what if your teacher said, well, I'd really like to know what each one of you thought. What is your experience like? So each student shares with the teacher, and the teacher publishes that alongside the other document. And then I ask the kids, which is the most true story? And that's a no-brainer, because they can all say our story, the story we tell. And then I say, that is why we read materials authored by, not necessarily about. That doesn't mean people from outside can't do it. But that is why we read books. And my job is to share with you as authentic and accurate information I possibly can, because that is where we get to the truth. And every one of our kids, I don't care who they are, deserve to be able to tell their own story. So the truth is that a lot of ways to get that to happen is to share a poem, and Birthright is full of them. Yep. To share a poem and then ask kids to translate that poem in from their own experience. So you've got Native kids really identifying the different tribal peoples, but the poetry really moves them. And then I have them draw while they're listening to poetry. But the empathy is really something, but you have to start with them asking themselves what's important to me too, each kid. But I don't want to take up much more time, but I do want to tell one story that is just was the one thing that really struck me. I was beginning to teach the play I Remember Mama about Norwegian immigrants. And so I asked the students in my freshman class, would you please go home and find out when your grandparents immigrated to this country? So yesterday I was listening to a presenter who was saying, these are some of the, really, he didn't say it, but these are some of the same things teachers say that are foolish, really, because they're insensitive, but we don't know it at the time. Anyway, so William raised his hand in the back of the room and he said, Mrs. Susak, does Indian count? And I have used the questions I asked myself in Roots and Branches, in a publication, in 2 or 3 other publications, because it just hit me. And so I acknowledged that. And then he was writing a poem Later, there was a concrete poem. Every kid in the school had to. So his concrete poem was an owl. And all of the words that the owl stands in the tree watching over us. Now, I don't have a direct quote from it right here, but I said, how do you know that story? And he said to all the rest of the kids, well, my mother told me, and her mother told her, he's Chippewa Cree. And her mother told her, and her mother told her, and her mother told her. And that was the first time. I can't tell you how many times I've had students say out loud, this is the first time I've admitted out loud I'm Native. And how powerful that is for those kids. So the beginning of the sharing and listening to, so it's not teacher directed, it's kid directed. It's the kids. Yeah.
Thank you, Dottie. That's a story that touched me so deeply when you first shared it with me. Does Indian count? Do I matter? Do I count? Wow. You know, we can do a lot with that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So one of the other questions I'm going to try to synthesize here is, you know, what advice would you have to become a leader, whether that's to affect change with Indian Education for All implementation in a group of teachers or a school or with your superintendent, particularly in places that are reluctant to do implementation. What advice would you have for teachers to have the courage to become leaders?
May I say something?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I was in that position. I came in as a principal at Trout Creek, and I just started implementing Indian Ed for All, and it wasn't well received. I'm being honest. By some, I was called. Ready for this? I was called a pagan. Some teachers left the school, transferred out, and that didn't stop me. I just feel it's the right thing to do, and eventually it was embraced by everyone. You know, the school, even though I haven't been there in 8 years, they still practice some of the teachings that they learned back then, whether it's the teachers or, you know, you go back to field day and see Run and Scream, and it's part of their annual field day events, and the stick game. And I think they learn tolerance, and it is from leadership. I'm no one special. I just didn't give up, and I think anybody can do it, but the leadership has to embrace it. So maybe we need to go after leadership, and for professional development, they need to sit down and talk with people, have meals with people from different tribes, get comfortable. I have, and it's changed my life. So it's become part of my daily life, actually. So anyway, for leadership, schools really have to start asking that question during the interview process when they're hiring superintendents. How will they address Indian Ed for All?
That's an excellent point. Excellent point. Anyone else?
I also think that anyone has the ability to be a leader. And I know that for us on the panel, we're being recognized for this, but I just know that there's so many individuals who are working on this, IEFA, and everyone has the ability, again, to be a leader. And even our students do, our children do. And when you introduce them to content or material that they haven't had access to before, they get really excited about it. And I was talking to one of my college professors recently, and she said, you know, we just need to create the culture that we want to see. And when we create that culture that we want to see in our classrooms, others will get excited about it too. So whether it be we instill this information in our children and they go tell other children on the playground the new exciting information they just learned. Everyone has the ability. It doesn't have to necessarily always be a top-down model. It can be a grassroots model, right? And we just need to create the culture that we want to see. And she told me something funny. She was like, when we create the culture that we want to see in our classrooms, others will get excited about it too. Other educators will get excited about it too. And so when you create this culture, she said probably about 70% are going to get on board right away. About 20% are going to be hesitant, but they'll be slow to warm, and it'll just take a little bit of time. And the other 10%, wow, they're getting ready to retire anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Anyone else?
Oh, it's interesting. When I was teaching in Hardin and Lodgegrass, we didn't have Indian for All. That was before it was funded. That was like 98, 99 up through 2002. And, it had been codified, but I don't even know if anyone really even paid attention to that was in the schools. And looking back on the curriculum that I had, and all the teachers at Lodgegrass, pretty much most of the teachers were Native and in fact Crow. But I don't even really know how much curriculum we used at the time, because I don't think that we had really thought that was something, when you go into teaching, you don't go in with the intent of designing curriculum for your students. You go in there with this idea that you were schooled in college, you're going to get the materials, you're going to teach the kids these lessons. Whatever's in the books and stuff is what you're going to use as a first year, even up through like your third and fourth year. Most teachers are not branching out to look for new stuff to bring in, because they also have to fit into the scheme of things with the whole curriculum in the school. So I never really had that experience of trying to advocate on a school-wide level from the inside. I've been someone who's been asked to come in and help either design curriculum or, do professional training for teachers. But so I guess I'm too old for that. Just kidding.
So, something that's come up a lot recently. Oh, Dottie, did you have something to say?
Well, I just wanted to say that when I first started doing my research for the Christa McAuliffe, I went to every tribal education director, and I went to every high school and asked, what Indian authored materials do you use and text do you use? And I went to Browning. This was 1994. Most of them said, we don't know. The English teachers, we don't know. I went to Browning and they said, well, we teach Hiawatha by Longfellow. And of course, that was before Denise Juneau was teaching there. And so she introduced it. And then I looked at the distributions of texts for schools. 99% of all distributions of texts that were sent to schools were all authored by non-native people from outsiders. So when that is what the kids are reading, it's really, really hard. Mm-hmm. I made it my business to collect and to make available. And even at one conference, I went up to the CEO of Scholastic and I said, I want to tell you this, you don't have enough books on your table authored by Native people. You've got 3. God, I mean, an Indian in the cupboard does not count. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So we have come a long way, but I know what you're talking about, Shane, because and I live in Minnesota now, where we have an Indian ed program, but it is only for Indian kids. The difference between Montana and Minnesota is that the idea is that everybody needs this education. Everybody does.
Yep.
But I just don't have a platform here in Minnesota, so I'm still on the podium someplace or about a platform in Montana.
Jump on in, Karen.
Mhm.
I was just going to say that I feel like we're confined sometimes to the pacing guide that's required of us. And within that pacing guide, there's dictated material or dictated standards that have to be covered within a certain period of time. But I'm going to echo what was just actually put in chat, that what I've started doing is saying, well, if we have to teach this standard in the pacing guide at this time, I can easily substitute this piece of content for this piece of
Right.
content. And now we are actually using Native American authored content about Native Americans that is authentic in place of some of these other stories authored by others. And the great thing is, and it did take there's a lot of digging involved, but in, let's say, Imagine It by Macmillan McGraw, there's one Native American story by Jerry Keams that's when the spider brought the sun. I feel silly because I can't think of the title. But we had called her and arranged for her to come out and do a school visit, and she came. And when you start visiting with people like that or interacting with people that have the resources and the literature, the connections start to occur. So it takes one piece, and then all of a sudden it builds upon everything else.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that you brought that up too, because that is another thing that we hear a lot is, I've got prescripted curriculum, and so where does this fit in? And I think that there's the pressure of, yes, this is what you shall teach. This is what the Board of Public Ed, has, or the Board of Ed, not Public Ed, but boards have said, hey, we forked out this money, here's your curriculum. And it takes a tremendous amount of energy. I came from never having curriculum. I always had to create my own curriculum, and I almost always taught multi-grades. So I had to make things work. But when I think you've been in a system where here is your McGraw-Hill math, and here's your Houghton Mifflin, and then you don't have the background knowledge, I think it can be really, really intimidating to think about how on earth do I do Indian Ed on top of this all? And I'm tired and I've got an IEP meeting. So what advice do you have to teachers who are feeling like, it's just so overwhelming? Where do I begin?
Is that a question? Like,
Mhm.
okay, sorry. I know it was a question because it sounded like there was a question mark at the end of the sentence, but I didn't know. Okay, sorry. Where do you begin? Pick something that you are really feeling comfortable, a topic that you're really feeling comfortable that you already teach, and seeing how you can expand that into IEFA. And I would also just really like to echo the student choice. Ask your students what they are interested in, because you're automatically going to get that engagement piece, right? School should never be a hostage situation where, you have to do all the things. It's what would you like to learn? And maybe it's something that you can engage in together. You're learning together with your students because they're genuinely interested in this.
Mhm.
So I'm going to actually hit pause there because we only have 2 more minutes and then we are done with the session. It always flies by and it is always so inspirational. And it seems like last year we did say, let's spend another 6 weeks or 6 times on this. So we created the webinar series, but in 10 seconds or less, something that these teachers can go away from today feeling inspired by. How would you inspire them?
I'm not sure it's inspirational, but I would just suggest finding, I think literature is the easiest way to begin with because it can be encompassing in all different areas. So I would find one book that you like, that tells a story, and then build on that book. It can even be like I used she, et co earlier. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Mhm.
I used that book as an example earlier, but that's literally where I started. And that book, even though it is a beautifully done book for young children, it doesn't mean that high school students won't enjoy it. And it doesn't mean that it won't lead to stimulating conversations at a high school level. It's a starter right there. And then you build on that starter with other pieces that become linked. And eventually, you'll find that you have a whole basket of things in your bag. And then the other suggestion I would make is truly take the time to read a book like Fool's Crow, especially with the foreword. I thought that the book that the Fool's Crow version that I read just this last summer in the foreword was by, he lives up south of Big Timber by McLeod, and I can't think of his name right now, was so beautiful just in regards to the idea that we are connecting back to nature, we're connecting to our history, we're connecting to people that were here before us that have this vast amount of appreciation and love for the things that we too love. So that's where I would go.
Unfortunately, we must bring this to an end so we can get to our next session. We do have a short break and then we will be reconvening in room 1, hopefully no more Zoom issues. I thank each and every one of you. I keep seeing how inspirational your words are and your role modeling, and I love each and every one of you, and I am just I do my job because of people like you, and of course because of the people like you teachers who are here at our conference striving to do better, striving to know better, and we at OPI and Indian Education for All, we are here to support you. So please, if you have any questions, reach out to us. If you want to contact any of these amazing people, I can put you in touch with them. So please, mazel tov, huge mazel tov, and congratulations, and thank each and every one of you for taking this time with us at this conference. We'll see you soon.